Start the recording. Hi, my name is Renee Hobbs. Welcome to CBC 534. Today's date is March 28th. I'm here with the amazing students enrolled in the Graduate Certificate in Digital Literacy at the University of Rhode Island. With me, joining me tonight is Sherry Jackson, Barbara, Pat, Denise, Meg, Mary, and Angie. Did I miss anybody? Okay, I'm really glad you're here. I'm going to just share my screen with you and talk a little bit about the topics that we have on tap for tonight. Obviously, this week's theme is digital storytelling. And oh, what a perfect, confluence of topics for us to consider in relation to your Leap 3 project. Due just 1 week from today, digital storytelling. The theme question for this week's class is, what makes digital narratives so powerful and complex a tool for learning? And so I thought we would do 3 things tonight. I really want to review some of the ideas that came up as you engaged in the readings. I want to talk a little bit about story structure, and that's really all. And then I want to talk about what work I'd like you to do for next week. Let's start with your Google Doc notes on the readings this semester. This term. One of the things I really appreciated, this is the first time I've been using the really interesting piece from the American Journal of Public Health about digital storytelling in the context of public health. So those of you who read and commented on that, of course, that was fascinating. I was surprised to find that the public health community was experimenting in such a robust way with digital storytelling. And I was even more pleased to see how thoughtfully they were addressing some of the ethical issues that we talked about when we talked about issues of representation. To me, that was a really pleasing thing to see. The Ranieri and Bruni piece, of course, deals with some issues of power relationships, right? As they get context of thinking about designing projects that give students real voice. So one of the things I was really pleased to see is that you are clearly making connections between these readings and you're thinking about your final project, right? So I was really pleased to see how, as you were reading these pieces, you were already starting to develop some nuance and sophistication in terms of thinking about what you'd like to do for your final project. And of course, I went through and made yellow highlights for the ideas that you shared that I thought were really interesting. And in some ways, I think that the challenges of the project that you're involved in this week, your digital storytelling project, reveal some of the complicated tensions and paradoxes here. So one of the topics that struck me as kind of something that you're going to deal with, which is almost like to share or not to share. Do you feel comfortable sharing your digital story with the open internet? Why or why not? So let's talk a little bit about the idea that in this assignment, you're producing a story that's really designed to be a public artifact. But as you're working on your project, I bet you might be wondering about to what extent you feel comfortable sharing your digital story as a public artifact. What have been your thoughts as you've been thinking about your digital story? Are you comfortable with it being a public artifact? Why or why not? Go for it. Pat.
That is something I've thought a lot about because I'm also including some other people in my story. So it is something also that makes me very nervous and anxious.
Thanks for telling us. What other perspectives on this? Jamie? Cornelia?
Oh, I'll go after Jamie.
Okay. I'll mute mine. I guess I shouldn't mute it.
No, you're good. We can hear you. Tell us your.
Okay.
Are you comfortable sharing your digital? Are you going to be comfortable sharing your digital story? Why or why not?
Well, to be honest with you, I changed my story. So I had one idea and then I said, no, that's too much of my own personal life that I want to reveal. And then I had another story that I actually drew all the pictures for and wrote all the script for. But then I said, no, that's about my granddaughter and I don't feel comfortable sharing that. So now I'm on my third story that I think I've zeroed in something I'm okay with sharing.
Ah, interesting. Other perspectives on this? Are you going to feel comfortable sharing your digital story with the world? Why or why not? Mary? Cornelia.
Oh, sorry, Cornelia, go ahead. My thought is very similar to Jamie's, where I had one idea and then I was uncomfortable with it, feeling like it was too much. And I'm still having such a tentative relationship with so many things that we're doing in this class. And so I can answer the question by saying by the time I create my week 3, I feel like we'll have transitioned through that. But right now I still feel really kind of tentative and anxious.
Thanks for sharing. Mary? Oops. Take your microphone.
Oh. Yeah, is it on now?
Yeah.
Okay. I have been thinking about it, and I also think that while I'm pretty settled on a topic, I did reflect that if I were to prepare a story just for this audience, it would probably be different from the one that will be available more publicly. I just noticed that when I was thinking about my story that I'm writing.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So if the story you were sharing just for our class,
mm-hmm.
the story might take a different form or it might be a different content.
I think the one that is for public consumption may have a different level of depth to it than one which I would just share with the class. I was just thinking about that. You know, if it were shared via Sakai or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Matthew.
Hey, so can you guys hear me fine?
Yep.
I was kind of going through this too because there was a story I originally thought of and kind of, it seems like it'd be a trend here. Everyone's kind of reflecting back and saying not quite. I have students that have started to follow my educational Twitter because it's a lot of social media usage in my school. So I was kind of hesitant because, I mean, I'm sure they've clicked on the blog, talk about midnight readers. So it's kind of nightmare readers, sorry. I was kind of hesitant on, making something that was like so personal, where, like Mary said, if it was for something for this class, it might be a little different. So it is a different atmosphere that you're releasing that into.
Barbara.
I've chosen a story. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I've chosen a story from my childhood that, is not embarrassing and has a little poignant part to it. So I've shared this story with others in various settings in the past. So I'm comfortable sharing it. There are other probably stories from my life that I might not want to share publicly, but this was the first one that came to my mind, and it's suitable for public sharing, hopefully.
Right. So you've given it some thought, but you're not wrestling with the anxiety about the who the audience is and how the audience will make sense of it. I've been thinking a lot about whether or not I should give you choice about how you distribute this story, given the reading this week, and thinking, well, why is it I want them to speak to a public audience? And why don't I want to give you choice on that topic? So it's probably too late for this go round, but I'd welcome your thoughts about if you ever did this assignment with your own students. Would you want students to speak to a public audience? Would you want them to have control over how they shared the work? Does it matter from a learning point of view whether or not kids or learners experience the pressure of speaking to a unknown, wide, diverse public audience? Does it matter really or not? Adam?
Can you hear me? I think that it's important to develop some kind of public speaking, or I guess more in this case, public sharing voice, understanding where your comfort level is in sharing parts of yourself, but being able to, I guess, represent yourself for a diverse range of people. I think it has some aspect of that is important, more so than just being able to, in a closed setting, tell a more personal story. Maybe the important part is actually deciding what parts of that story is important. What themes do you want people to hear about you, or what do you consider public domain, I guess, from your life, and understanding how to craft a story around that, I think has some value to it.
Why? What is the value to it?
I think the value is that you're, I guess, in the case of the internet, you're contributing to almost a canon of human experience, I guess, and at being a contributing person to that. Because if you think of all the things that you do consume, I feel like a big aspect of the internet is this idea of sharing, that you are willing to give parts of yourself to get things for free, or you're willing to listen to something like The Moth. You should be able to, I guess, know how to craft a story for yourself in that way. Maybe not share on such a deep level as some of those stories, but be able to be willing to engage as well. To get that kind of content, you have to give some kind of content. Maybe it's a trading system, a barter system.
Thanks for sharing. That is absolutely intriguing. So I'm inviting you to reflect on, if you were to do this assignment with your own learners, does it matter really in the end whether the digital story that you create is shared with a truly public audience, or would it be sufficient for students to create something that was just shared within the circle of the classroom? Denise, and then Barbara, and then Jamie.
Well, I think it also has to be spoken to, like, you have to bring it to your principal's attention. Like, for our school, we can't post anything that's school related on our own personal account. So for us to share or have our students share, we would have to get special permission to make sure that all of our students, one, have the media release, and two, are able to share their story online in a public way. But to take that aside or take that out of the situation, I think I think the kids can share their story and learn some pretty important skills and lessons as they're trying to come up with their story. I don't think they have to share it with everybody in a public way, because they still can learn some of the things that we're learning as we're trying to grapple with the idea of what story to tell, and if we are comfortable sharing it with everyone, you know?
Yeah, so Denise is making a great point. There's lots of learning outcome to crafting the story and creating the story that doesn't really rely on having a public audience. Great point, Denise. Other perspectives?
I was going to say exactly the same thing. That with my kids going only up to 5th grade, I don't think we're going to put them out on the big wide web. But even if we could do something in-house, the learning process, like developing their storytelling voice and developing the format for telling a story so that it's interesting and it has a shape to it and it has a punchline, you might say. Those skills are what they really need to focus on. And whether they broadcast it or not, at this point, isn't so essential.
Thanks for sharing. Other perspectives?
So I had a couple of thoughts. One is that I think it's reasonable for us in this graduate class to be grappling with this because that seems really appropriate to the content of the class. I think for K-12 education anyway, it may be different parameters around the expectations. And even though I teach younger students, I am involved in what happens throughout all of the grade levels, but I'm still thinking that it's different than the college level. And I think that in some ways my concern is that students might not be, they might want to overshare when they're on their own personal social media. So maybe rather than having them create and share really personal stories, depending on how personal they were. I mean, some things I was listening to on the Moth, you know, well, I lost my virginity at blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, so we don't want to go there. But maybe to have kids think they can reflect on it. And I also think I would want to have my students to start to be the kind of human beings that can forgive other people for mistakes that they make. And so maybe start a conversation around, we might see things that are captured on the internet that we need to not be super judgmental about.
Interesting. So by people willing to be vulnerable and show the mistakes they made, and as they tell their digital story and it's about a failure or it's about a mistake, that in a way you're saying that creates an opportunity for thinking about compassion and forgiveness and sensitivity. So from the point of view of the person who's hearing the story. Okay, so other thoughts. I wonder if the next time I do this assignment, I should give students choice or not. Been thinking a lot about that. What are your thoughts? Meg and then Mary.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm on questionable Wi-Fi, so I like to make sure. I think that there's value somewhere between saying this is only going to be shared within the context of our classroom versus this is going to be shared publicly. And I think that there's a conversation and a learning opportunity that could be had there, even if you only have students publish within the sphere of a classroom. But to consider how their story might change or how the topic might change, how their approach might change, if it were to be published for a broader audience, for a public audience. Because I know going through the process myself recently, that influenced me greatly in the direction I went with the story that I'm choosing to share. Had it only been for this group of people, it would have been completely different. So I don't know if like the next iteration of this course, you should limit or give options, but I think that there's opportunity for that analysis there of what would be different.
Thanks for sharing. Mary?
Yeah, I like the idea of an option as well. I teach college level, and I talk about publishing to a public audience a lot, but I don't require it. Maybe because but I like what Meg was saying about the value of the conversation, and Adam as well. I think the conversation itself is super important. So even with the notion that it would be optional, that conversation could still happen.
Mhm. Thank you so much. Anybody else want to weigh in on this issue about the sort of unique characteristics of this assignment where you are producing something for the open internet? One of the, I'll tell you a little bit about my thinking. I've been really, just by rereading the articles for this week, kind of second guessing myself a little bit, but I'll share with you what motivated me to do it this way. You know, I was just in Brazil, right? The last couple weeks doing some media literacy in Brazil. And I learned that in Brazil, they make more use of WhatsApp than they do of Facebook or other social media. Give me a thumbs up if you're familiar with WhatsApp. Right? It's a closed social network where you establish like circles of people, and then you can send and receive text messages and photos and everything else to a group. And as I started talking to the Brazilian educators and the teenagers about WhatsApp, it struck me that maybe for a lot of people, this social media tool might not really be a tool to practice democracy at all. That essentially it could be a place where you communicated within your enclaves. In Brazil, of course, a country with vast social differences and gaps between the rich and the poor and between the multi-ethnic society, I started realizing that the potential of social media to keep us in our enclaves and to not have us experience the risk of the public voice, could be happening in Brazil, as plenty of people were very comfortable sharing within their small circle of family and friends, and absolutely terrified about doing anything that ventured beyond that to a wider audience. So it was, in fact, that sensibility that made me sort of go, okay, well, I'm gonna force you guys into the deep end of the pool, right? Speak to a big audience, and we'll see what happens. Obviously, I'm really glad that you're reflecting on it and you're aware of the way in which you must be appreciative of that big public audience. Okay. Last thoughts on, did I see a hand up? Pat, did I see a hand up? Anybody else want to make any comments on this public-private audience thing? Okay, let's move on, because I have a really fun thing I want to do next. So I've been thinking a lot about how important story structure is. And some of you even wrote about that in your reflections this week around how the reading material was making you think about storytelling and story structure. So I thought it would be fun for us to watch this short piece. It's called Pixar Storytelling Rules Number 4, Drama and Conflict. We'll watch it as a group, and here's the question we're going to discuss when it's done. As you're watching, I want you to be thinking, how will you use drama and conflict in your digital story? Okay, give me a thumbs up if you know what we're going to be doing now. We're watching this video. We're thinking about that question. It's just about 5 minutes long. Let's take a look at it now. It's a strange shape, this thing. Let's see if I can get it to play.
Everyone knows that stories should have at least some amount of conflict, but compelling conflict is more elusive than just two people arguing. There are two parts of conflicts we need to explore. What are the stakes? Meaning, what is the character risking? And what are the forces stacking against her? Almost each one of Pixar's movies has a life or death moment. So characters are risking their lives, but usually they also risk something that means more to them and to us. At first, the stakes in WALL-E seem to deal with loneliness. If WALL-E doesn't win Eva's heart, he will stay alone. But this is not just some regular loneliness. We're talking about remaining the only sentient being alone in the planet, watching the same movie forever, talking to a cockroach. That's how Pixar raised the stakes. It's not about some guy losing a girl. It's about remaining alone in the universe forever. If that's not enough, later in the film, the entire future of the human race is in danger, as Wally, Eva, and the captain go against the evil spaceship. In Toy Story 3, the characters look death in the face. They hold hands, accepting their inevitable doom in the incinerator. But as we mentioned before, the movie raises the possibilities of far worse fate than being burned. One is remaining in the kindergarten purgatory, constantly abused. The second is losing your sense of self to become a warped, sadistic toy like Lotso.
You used to do everything with her? Yeah, then she threw us out. No, she lost you. She replaced us.
Both fates strip the characters of their identity, the former by denying the toys their main trait, their playability, and the latter by losing their morals and integrity. Up is a rousing adventure set in South America with chases, talking dog, exotic animals, and a zeppelin. Yet the most threatening moment is when Carl had to let go of the house he's been carrying on his back. His life with Ellie is what gave him meaning. That house is the last relic of that life. Without it, will he be able to find meaning? Will he find a reason to go on living? Adventures put characters in physical harm, but if that's all there is, sprinkled with some international conspiracy, the story won't move us. A story needs emotional stakes if it wants to grab the audience by the throat. Stacking the odds against your character is the continuation of our first chapter that dealt with polar opposites. Until characters are pushed to the wall, we'll never know what's really important to them. What are they willing to risk? The harder it is for your character to get what it wants, the more she'll have to risk. Think of Mike Wazowski, breaking school rules, risking being expelled, facing humans for the first time on his own, risking his life just to find out if he can be scary. It is only after realizing that no one, not even his friends, believe in him, that Mike is pushed to risk his own life. What he actually wants almost doesn't matter as long as it's important to him and hard for him to achieve. Once you know what your character wants, make it extremely hard for her to achieve. As we watch her try and fail, and succeed and fail, she will have to risk more. Risk takers are admirable. They are gamblers of the soul, willing to put everything they have on the line for something they believe in. Those moments, when they are true and well-earned, never fail to inspire an audience.
I can do this!
You're right. I know you can.
Lucky fan!
Alright guys, thanks for watching. In the next episode of Pixar Storytelling Rules, we're going to talk about the essence of structure. Don't forget to subscribe and visit our website at loopanimations.com.
Okay. So let me see if I can. What's going on here? Oh, come on. I want to see if I can stop sharing my screen. But I've got to figure out how to do that. Oh, there we go. Okay, so our focus question is, how are you going to use drama and conflict in your digital story? Who wants to go first? Mary, Barbara. Barbara.
Sure, why not?
I love you guys.
I wouldn't say my story really has conflict in it. It does have some drama.
Aha, good.
It has some drama, and it touches your heart. Or at least it's supposed to. Okay. It should touch your heart, and that's my intent.
So this guy said that the character faces obstacles and is pushed to the limit, and where the stakes are high, and that's how drama is created. Is that working in your story?
In my story, a child faces a challenge, and the drama is the parent's response to that child. And that's where the drama comes in. How did those parents react to that child? And what did that situation leave that child with?
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. How is drama and conflict part of your story, Mary?
In the story that I'm thinking of doing, the conflict will be internal. So I'm thinking about a story about repatriating after living overseas for a really long time. And so I'm thinking that the conflict will be the internal conflicts.
About identity.
Pardon, identity, yeah, and feeling a sense of place.
Nice. How is drama and conflict coming into your story, Meg?
So mine also has to do with identity and some internal conflict. But when I was trying to find the moment of my story, there's definitely drama that I identified. There's physical peril possibilities in my story that lead to like the resolution. So I think that there's drama within those moments because there's high possibility for physical harm that occurs that lead to the end of the story. So there's some drama there.
Nice, wonderful. Okay, you're reflecting on your story, Matt. How is drama?
That was my listening post. Sorry.
Too bad, buddy.
I have to be honest. I'm not quite sure which story I want to share now. So actually, I've been kind of taking notes as people have been going about like which types of obstacles in my head. So like kind of like picking and choosing. So I'm in listening mode right now.
I'm glad to know that now you are thinking about how the drama or the conflict is going to be the hinge of your story.
Yeah, like I have like stories in my head that I'm like, well, like could I tell this story? Is that gonna have the obstacle? So I'm like, I got 3 here. I'm just kind of like breaking them down, see if it's doable.
Okay.
And interesting, actually.
Other reflections. How is drama and conflict coming into your story, Angie?
I'm kind of torn right now because there's a lot of things going on. I feel like I'm not that interesting or dramatic of a person to share like a Pixar quality story. That's honest. But then at the same time, it's part of me to exaggerate. So if I'm exaggerating, I am being myself. So I could embellish my story to make it more dramatic or to add something, but then I would probably also need to have some kind of disclosure where just to identify my story as fiction.
Who has been thought? Has anybody else had moments where they've thought like Angie, like I might need to embellish this and like up it up a little bit to make it more okay? Look at all the hands go up, Angie. So yeah. I'm glad you're thinking about that. You know.
I like that Angie said she doesn't find herself that interesting. So I even wrote down, I'm from middle class white America, like suburb America. Like I haven't had a lot. I know I'm fortunate enough not to have a lot of obstacles to overcome in my life. So almost like I feel bad if I were to exaggerate this obstacle, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, so many people have it way worse than me. So I think I'd have to definitely mention at least some sort of disclaimer of exaggeration.
I think a bunch of people are thinking about that. Jamie.
A lot of the stories that we listened to preparing for this did have some really dramatic arcs to them. But one of the things that I really love about stories, short stories, and what I picked for when I looked at the Moth for the project last week when I couldn't join you guys, was just a story about an everyday part of life. I do think we everybody's got a story, no matter how boring our lives are, and it's just a matter of finding the right way to kind of approach it. So don't let anybody feel bad about not having that, war story to tell.
Yeah, getting a parking ticket can be a absolutely powerful storytelling with a lot of insight on your character, your hopes, your dreams, your failures, your foibles. Small stories actually can have a lot of impact that way. But we're thinking about drama and conflict in your story. I'd love to hear from everybody. How are you thinking about drama and conflict in your story?
I have a question on that subject, Cornelia. I'm listening to you say those two words, and I almost having this like dialogue with myself, and I know what the words mean, or I think I do, but I'm wondering, can you have drama without conflict? Can you have conflict without drama? If you have both, is it a better story? So maybe I'm over focusing on the words, but those are questions that are running through my head.
So glad that you're thinking about that. What's the difference between drama and conflict? Because Barbara was very clear about that. You when you kicked us off, you said it's drama, not conflict. So how do we distinguish? What do those, why those two different words?
Does conflict involve two different people, where drama could be something just within yourself?
That's one way. I think, Sherry, you might be onto something. I remember the narrator of the short video that we saw said that the character there are stakes, right? There are risks. And so when I think of drama, I think of a character who's facing risks. And when I think of conflict, I think of, good guy, bad guy, or I think of an agent an agent that could that could create problems. So maybe it's about how risk, or the different types of risk that characters experience. Sometimes risk is internal. Sometimes risk is another human being. Sometimes risk is like the weather, right? So, but the idea that both drama and conflict face a stakeholder, a hero, a character encountering risk. And then the film went on to say that the better the drama, the bigger, the more difficult the risk. Right? And so that idea of risk being framed in terms of escalating risk, right? Rising action, we say, right? Where the problems keep piling up and getting bigger and bigger and bigger until they get resolved. All right, any other storytelling around how you're going to work drama into your story? Pat, and then Adam, I got to hear from you, buddy. Pat.
Well, I think more is the time limit to me is a restriction.
Yeah.
Because I started off on one story and I talked about it in my writing. It was too emotional and too long when you get to all of the things that go into it. So then I scaled back, and I'm still worried it's going to be too long. So you also have to get to your point of the climax of the story before you run out of time.
It's true.
So
that's right. And so what to omit and still make the story make sense.
Right.
Yeah. This is a very important, and that really then has to do with how do you define the risk, right? Because maybe the way you think about the risk shifts given you only can tell a 6-minute version of the story. Yeah, glad to think about it. Adam, how are you thinking about drama and conflict in your story?
I don't know. I think I'm in the same boat as a number of other people where I don't necessarily feel like the story is extremely compelling on its own, but I kind of tend to think of like, what's the end message I want to convey? Why do I want to tell this story in the first place? And then crafting something. I think when telling a story, I'm thinking more of the entertainment factor as opposed to, is there any, like, as opposed to something very deep, something more for the purpose of entertainment, I think is what I'm more thinking of. So how can I convey entertainment using a story that's maybe true, might even be unreliable in the narrative voice? Is this a true story? Is it not? So I'm kind of trying to grapple with some of those things, but I want to have like a point to the story above all else.
Cool. So in some ways, I think that was the a big idea that the Pixar little video there was trying to suggest, right? That somehow the kind of conflict that the character lives through, experiences, confronts, ends up coming to reveal the moral or the values message that's at the heart of it. So there's maybe a link between how the character wrestles with conflict, how the character is challenged, and then how the meaning or the moral that we get of the story. One of the reasons why I want you to make sure you think about that is that, you know, stories, it's ironic that as much as we consume stories, we don't necessarily all get a lot of practice in composing them. I went to Catholic school for 12 years and I wrote a lot in high school, but I never was asked to write a story, ever, right? We just did not do fiction. We didn't do storytelling. We didn't do narrative it was like before the creative writing movement, I think, even happened, you know. That's how old I am. So I feel like I never really learned about story structure. And as an author, I learned about it as an English literature major reading other people's stories, but not so much in writing my own. So that's partly what I want you to do for next week. So now I'm going to make a turn here. You are going to be thinking about audience, since you're speaking to a public audience, and you are going to be thinking about drama and conflict, right? But let me share my screen with you. I have one other resource that I'd like you to think about before you, as you go into your final phase now of producing your digital story. Let me talk a little bit about that. So your digital story is your main project. So I'm totally aware that that's really what you're doing. I'm making a slight switch in the syllabus. The syllabus which we have for the course is not what we're doing this week. I realized that it was a crazy thing for me to think we could learn about copyright while you're completing your digital story. So we're gonna just flip weeks 10 and 11. Next week's theme is your create to learn journey. And our focus question is going to be, how can create to learn pedagogies be applied to the context of your work and life? So we'll be thinking about what adaptations could be made to make this kind of pedagogy relevant to your world. So I'd like you to read the 2 last chapters in Create to Learn, and then please review at least 3 lessons from the Pixar Khan Academy, The Art of Storytelling. Who knew that Pixar and Khan Academy created an entire curriculum called The Art of Storytelling? Wow. So it's quite charming. You can see over here on the left-hand side, we are all storytellers. That's lesson 1. Character, lesson 2. Story structure, lesson 3. Visual language, lesson 4. film grammar, lesson 5, and pitching and feedback. And each of these little activities is quite fascinating and includes a variety of video and other resources. So all I want you to do is I want you to review 3 elements of this curriculum. Perhaps since we've been talking about story structure, you'll go learn about the story spine, right? And think a little bit about the structure. Each of these lessons often features a short video. And there's also, you can see a transcript so you can read the video, read about the video. Sometimes there's other materials. I don't really want you to review the whole curriculum, but I'd like you to poke around in it. Perhaps you're thinking about your character and how you're going to introduce character, right? You might poke around here and see if you can gain any insights thinking about the character arc, or there's the stakes, right? So what I'd like you to do is just, sorry about that, is just take a look at a couple of elements, 3 lessons from the art of storytelling. I think that might give us some insight on trying to address the focus question for next week. How can create to learn pedagogies be applied to the context of your work? Really, this is the big project, that enormous deadline and that sense of being a public actor is really the goal here. And if you're watching this recording, a couple of students are not here tonight. If you're watching this recording, I'm going to type in my special request for you on the homepage tonight, and you should be able to access that within the next few minutes. Now, let me see, before I let you go, if you have any questions. Any questions?
I have a question, Renee, about the logistics of creating a digital story, because I had a computer crash and lost probably a decade worth of photographs. So I'm short on my own personal photographs. Can I use Creative Commons images?
Of course.
Or is something like animation possible for this project?
Yes, and of course, something like a podcast is also possible. You don't need to use images at all.
Okay.
So you can make it an audio-only podcast, or you can choose to use images.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thanks for asking. What other questions do you have?
I have a question related to the reading. Is this a good time to ask?
Sure.
Okay. The reference to new media literacy, again, I understood the context, but I'm not sure how it relates to digital literacy and digital authorship and the relationship between the 3 terms.
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. So each of these terms, new media literacy, digital authorship, and what was the third term you were curious about?
Digital literacy.
Digital literacy.
Yeah.
Each of these terms developed from a discourse community that is, hold on, let me just unpin, let me see if I can, there we go. Each of these terms developed from a discourse community that has its own history. So new media literacies is a concept developed by Henry Jenkins in 2006, when the MacArthur Foundation asked him to review the scholarly literature on media literacy and to make it relevant for the new era where social media was on the rise. So new media literacies is an interpretation of media literacy in relation to the new social media. Digital literacy, my goodness, that term has an awfully long history. Paul Glister wrote the very first book about it back in the 90s. He basically said, in that book, he said something like, media literacy should be applied to the internet. And so ever since then, the term digital literacy has basically meant reading and writing in relationship to the internet. But of course, as the internet has changed, the meaning of digital literacy has changed. So in the old days, digital literacy was about reading static web pages because that's what the web was like. As the web became more dynamic and interactive and social and participatory, the concept of digital literacy changed along the way. So depending on when you're reading the literature, if you're reading it in 2006 or 2010 or 2014, the meaning of the word digital literacy has changed over that time period. Now, there's not a lot of people who are using the term digital authorship, which is why I snuck in and grabbed it, right? So I noticed that not too many people are using the word digital authorship. And of course, Julie and I, when we created the program, the graduate certificate program and the Summer Institute, we recognized right away, right? She was a specialist in reading online, right? And I'm a communication professor, right? I teach future media professionals, right? So we started thinking about digital literacy in relation to the reading and writing dimensions. And so in that sense, then digital authorship is kind of like a subset. Like it's underneath the umbrella of digital literacy, and it's like a subset. The same way that online reading comprehension is a subset of digital literacy. Now, of course, I could talk for 100 hours about this, so I don't want to like overwhelm you, but did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It does. Definitely.
Good. Started because, of course, it's challenging. I'm glad you're thinking about how these ideas fit together. That's a good indication to me that you're trying to make a big synthesis, right? And that's the kind of question you ask when you're trying to synthesize. What other questions do you have?
I actually had a question about the final project. I'm not sure if you want me to hold on to that or just let her fly.
Yeah, let it fly.
So originally in my email, I discussed the possibility of creating a professional development opportunity. But as I kind of was reading through people's posts this week, kind of reminded me of like a little passion project I was doing. I'm interested in creating an interview with these seniors that I've had in my advisory cohort from freshman year to senior year as a vlog to talk to incoming freshmen. Do you think that's something I could make into a final project?
Are you imagining that your current seniors are going to offer advice and insight to the newbies coming up?
Yeah, so kind of like just questions I had in mind, like what did it feel like coming into a freshman? Like, what were your anticipations? What were your struggles? What helped you get over them? What was, a crisis you had, and how did you overcome it? And then at the end, I want to talk about like, well, you've just finished a chapter of your life, still opening a new one. What are you afraid now? So to kind of let them know it comes full circle.
So what I like about this project, think about how many bells it rings, right? First of all, for kids to be able to get to those finished vlogs, they're going to have to move through a learning experience, right? That will involve a full-scale production process. You're going to have to scaffold that to support them to be able to do that, right? So it seems like you'll have to create a curriculum in order to enact that process, right? And how you design that, you may not be able to produce those finished student works in the next 6 weeks, but you'll certainly be able to create the design for how that work will happen, right? Okay. So yes, that sounds like a curriculum project that has a media production as a work product that will come, and maybe you'll create a sample, or maybe you'll work with one kid and do a pilot test. You'll have to figure out what can you accomplish in 6 weeks on that. But that sounds like a really cool project and very much related to the themes and ideas we've been exploring.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Other questions? Okay, so in the next 7 days, if you guys have any questions, I have lots of experience making podcasts and animations and whiteboards. If you run into any trouble, you know the best way to reach me is through Twitter, right? So tweet me if you have any questions. You can call. Denise, I see your hand raised. Adam, I see your hand raised.
Quick question. So can our digital story for next week involve other voices?
Yes.
Does it have to be a personal story? Because I kind of have this idea of, I'm not going to say what it is, but it would involve not just me telling the story.
I believe that will fit with the, I think a multivocal story fits within the rubric. I'm now just going to the rubric and seeing, you want to probably just take a look. I'm going to share my screen. How am I grading your work? I'm asking these 5 questions. You have composed and performed an original short story that helps an audience to understand who you are. Your story enables you, the storyteller, to learn from the story you tell by finding a deeper meaning to your story. You've used language or image to offer a narrative that activates the emotion of the audience using a dramatic arc that includes a particular moment that illustrates an insight. Your story prompts the audience to reflect on their own experience and look for larger truths about the nature of the human experience. And you've posted your digital story to your blog and tweeted a link. It seems like it could be multivocal.
It'll fit the bill.
Nice.
Okay.
Ooh, cool. See, now notice how your question, Adam, is igniting the intellectual creativity of everybody in the room. Multivocal, different voices. Oh. Thanks for asking that good question. Who's got another question?
I was just wondering if we could meet afterwards. I have a question.
Absolutely. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, but I'm going to hang on the Zoom. I'm not going to cut off the Zoom, so I'll talk to you, Denise, or anybody else who wants to hang a little after class. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next Wednesday. Good luck with the production process, all right? Bye now. Well, that was fun.
Okay, for my Leap 2 project, I worked with Sherry, and the 2 of us sent in the link. We noticed that our link was not on with everybody else's on the page. I can't stand hearing myself.
Is it up there now?
I don't know if it's up there now. I didn't go back and double check.
Did you get an email from me?
Saying it was missing? No, but we did get an email from you, but you looked at Sherry's infographic for the week's readings instead of our LEAP project. So I wanted to make sure that we're getting credit for the work that we did on together.
Holy shit. Okay, so this is Denise, I'm really glad you're bringing this up to me. So as you just described it, when I went looking for your Leap 2, I found an artifact that I misunderstood as your Leap 2.
Yes.
Okay, you must send me an email.
I sent you an email this week already right after I got the grade for that assignment. Sherry and I talked and we're like, okay, we got to send her an email. I resent an email I sent before with the links on it, and I didn't get any response back. So I wanted to make sure that you saw it and that we could.
Thank you so much. I promise I will look at that before.
Do you want me to resend it?
No, I'll find it now.
Okay.
As long as it's Leap 2, I will find it in the email.
I sent you one as well with a link to our LEAP. So you got it from both of us. I'm glad you liked my infographic, though.
I thought your infographic was amazing. So again, you guys have loads of talent between the 2 of you. I can't wait to see. I'll be sure to get you your feedback on that by the end of the week.
Thank you.
Okay. Could I ask a real quick question, Renee? For the Summer Institute, I went on to eCampus and I didn't see a reference to it. I couldn't find a listing. So do I just sign up online? I wasn't sure how to go about that.
Yeah, so the way you sign up for the Summer Institute is you go to www.digiuri and you sign up through the Reg Online system. So you will be able to register for the graduate course there. When you register, it'll say, are you registering for graduate credit? And you'll just say yes. So www.digiuri.com.
Okay, perfect.
Is there a cutoff date for registering for that?
Once we hit 120 people, we close it.
Oh, all right, so I better do it.
We have about 40 now, so we're getting there. We're getting there. But
All right, so I better go and do it. All right, thanks.
huge rush. Cool. Thanks for letting me know. I should have mentioned that actually. You know, I'm glad you're like next week. I'm gonna put that on a remember, right, for the folks who are coming back. I forgot to even mention anything about it.
All right. Well, we got your back.
So glad. So glad. So glad somebody's paying attention to this summer. I can't think that far ahead yet.
So that leads me to another point where I already took both of my summer courses, and this is my last class for the certificate.
Nice.
So what do I do about getting my certificate because I'm not with everybody else in the next class?
It's a really great point. As I understand it, you're gonna, isn't it sad? You're gonna get it in the mail.
Okay.
Sad. But here's what's gonna happen. You'll be in, so we do this like public relations thing where we announce the cohort who's completed the program. You'll get put into the summer cohort. So
okay.
if you want to come and stand up and be part of the photo in the picture, right? Then I think what will happen is Kara Clayton or Julie will send you a note saying like on Thursday at 10 o'clock, we're going to stand all the graduates up and take a photo and you can come to be part of that. But I think what that means is you'll be considered in the 2008 summer cohort. Even though you, like you said, you finished early. You're technically like in the April cohort, but you're just
none.
One.
I didn't do it in the right order.
It's okay. I think what's nice to know is that you could do it in that order, right? And it turned out you did learn, right?
Yeah.
So we feel better knowing that people can have a successful experience doing it out of order. So it's good.
Thank you.
At some point, what I'm going to need from you, just so you know, this is coming on your radar screen, and I'll probably send you an email because I'm the one who has to write that press release. I'm going to need a paragraph, a bio, right?
Yep.
3 sentences or 5 sentences, you know, a kind of a bio now so I can brag about you to
okay.
the world.
Okay.
I'll pester you again in April, but you just put that on your list.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, cool. All right, what else?
I had one thought, and I mean, ideally I could have expressed it during the class, but we were, you know, there's a lot to be said in a short amount of time. But I was just thinking about back to the drama and conflict point that, you know, pretty much like there's a negative connotation to it describing a life experience as being traumatic and having conflict. And there's, you know, volumes of books written about how the goal is to avoid that. And to me, this assignment reminds me that regardless of how you frame it, it's part of life. And you can, you know, present it however you want, but to pretend that you can read an article and avoid drama and conflict, and that's an objective that you want to achieve. But just reminds me of why there's kind of grinding gears around those words.
Boy, what an insight. You know, it's such a great point. It is maybe some part of the language, right? That it's sort of like, wait a minute, I don't want drama and conflict in my life. I'm looking for a peaceful, harmonious life. But it's a good point. Yeah, I wonder if maybe that's a very interesting insight. And I wonder if in some ways the recognition that, to be human is to experience, goals and challenges and overcoming challenges. But you're right. The words drama and conflict don't, like you said, they grind at the gears. They seem like, wait a minute, I don't want that. You should write about that. That could make a nice essay. Right? Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay, I'll follow up on that.
Really, I like the theme. I think there's a lot of wisdom there. It's almost like two different communities using the words. They think they understand each other, but there's like a misunderstanding going on. Yeah, that's cool. Cool. Oh, she's waiting for you. All right, what other issues should we talk about?
What other what? I missed it.
Any other issues, questions, or challenges to solve tonight?
God, there's always so much when we talk to you. I try to get all prepped with everything. For me, the big, just jumping ahead of you guys, if that's okay. My big issue is I'm just still, I felt a lot of connection with the story that was the mobile storytelling.
Yeah.
I certainly have a very different life experience versus theirs as immigrants, but I felt I've experienced the exclusion from not being socially or involved in social media and online. And then I've also, in my short time in the program, experienced the joys of that connection. What does they call it? The participatory experience with our community within this class. And it was really interesting to see the themes that I was inspired by them as they stepped through their process. And, who knew that I'd be making a connection like that? But really that experience, if they can do it and their children, then I can do it.
Yeah. I'm so happy to hear that you feel that sense of, it makes you think differently about taking risks. It makes you think differently about being vulnerable. And, Lord knows, I think I tried for 30 years to try not to be vulnerable. Like that's what I wanted to be hyper confident all the time and never do anything that was not right, not 100% perfect. And then to realize, oh, actually, I'm actually, it's probably better, right, to reveal that I do not have it all together. And so just to see that part of the being a whole human being is it's empowering. It's just, damn it, it's just empowering. And I think you can't help but think that that we would probably understand each other better if we shared that more, right? Like we would probably we could probably have come closer to a peaceful world if people felt more comfortable with that. But I don't know, maybe that's just idealistic. I don't know.
Maybe by what we're talking about and everything we're addressing in this course can be the leading edge to exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because it
felt that way. Like teacher empowerment, it's like sort of like that's a really phenomenal 3 million teachers in this country, right? And when do we hear their voices? No, we don't. When are their stories told? I don't know. Not very much. So, yeah.
They seem like their voices are being controlled. I mean, several students in this class have said it's, we have very clear guidelines about the level of expression.
Right. Denise, even today, said, yeah, she faces a principal who's afraid of teachers using their public voices. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not allowed to put anything public out there. And especially not the kids aren't allowed to put anything out there public. There's strict guidelines around, like even when I sign them up for different programs that can track their progress, I can't use their real names. I have to use a nickname or a made up name. They're really, really worried about information from the children getting out there somehow. So it is very, very regulated.
Yeah. Yeah. I can be appreciative of that when it comes to issues of data privacy, but I feel like learning to be a citizen means practicing addressing people outside, your immediate social circle and family, and that practicing doing that should happen in school, especially, as kids move into the high school years. I guess I probably am a little more protective of little kids, but middle school and high school, when I was in high school, I did I don't know what it was called, like the Veterans of America speech thing. It was like a speech contest, right? And I kept thinking, why doesn't every kid have an experience of having to speak to a public audience when they're young, right? So it's so cool that you guys are wrestling with this. I think the experience of crafting part of your life as a story, it's transformative. And so I think if you have fun with it, if you enjoy, have fun with it, just have fun with it. Have fun with it, see what you learn. It's going to surprise you, and you'll probably be super proud of it. And maybe it doesn't even matter, because I was thinking today in the readings, it said something like, again, that reading just kept coming back to me about, like, am I doing this right? Process or product. It said, like, what do you really value? Is it does the product have to be like great? Or is it the learning process that matters most? And so for me, with this project, it's really the learning process that matters the most. And I hope it's listenable or watchable, but it's really, what do you learn as you craft your life into a narrative? What do you learn about yourself? What do you learn about,
In elementary school, it's often the process that's much more important, because the final project sometimes is so funny, but it's the process. But you look at the final project and go, oh my goodness, okay, well, you learned a lot doing it anyway.
Exactly. And you know what? At college, I sometimes feel like if only we cared about process, then I wouldn't have so many cheaters, right? Kids who are like taking the easy way out and cutting and pasting their way. And it's like, just use your real voice, sweetie. Don't feel like you have to pretend to be somebody you're not, right? So they just be authentic, then the learning experience would be bigger.
When I think, and what aggravates it is the focus on perfection. Like, as you're talking about process or product, I'm literally sitting here saying, I never considered that you could just pick one.
Right. That's right.
I've been very stressed about this because I've never done it, but I have this unspoken message coming from me that it has to be perfect, and it has to look good, and it has to. And so because of that, and you've never said that. So isn't that interesting?
But that's the other thing, like, on the evaluation of the rubric, it doesn't say anything about the process. We're not asking us how we're going through and what did we learn from it. So if you're saying it doesn't matter and it's the process that counts, like, when we're being creative, it doesn't say that on here.
Yeah, actually, it look on the rubric, it's, does your work have an impact?
Right.
That's what's being measured. It's not the product or the process. It's the does the audience have an aha? Right. So how?
But it also depends on who's watching it too, because your aha might not be somebody else's aha, and they might not see. They might say, "Oh, this was stupid" or whatever, and not see what we're trying to get across.
That's really true. And now, thank God, you've known me for 8 weeks, so you probably could make some reasonable guesses, right, about how I might read or listen to or watch your work. But it's true. When you speak to a public audience, ultimately you can never know
exactly
how the meaning is interpreted. And so there, it's really about what choices do you make to evoke that emotional response and invite the person to think about the values that you, or the moral story, the dimensions of the values that you want to communicate.
Right.
So yeah, it's tricky. I say this is definitely a graduate student level project, no doubt about it. Right. And so especially for, beginners in the storytelling process, I think the act of taking the risk is the main thing. So yeah, take the risk.
Thank you so much.
It was really fun. What a great class tonight. Thank you for staying.
Thank you.
Good night.
I'll see you guys next week. Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.